Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hampton Roads Real Estate Network. Today we are going to be talking about VA loans again with the Ashton. Today's discussion is about preparing to talk to a loan officer like Deanna here, and what are the documents and information you need for that first meeting. So Deanna, as a realtor, I will say that in my experience, there are a lot of people who have at least a little bit of anxiety or hesitation when it comes to talking to a loan officer. For whatever reason, many people first reach out to a realtor when they are thinking about buying a home. And in a lot of ways, it does make sense. However, I personally always encourage people to start that financing conversation with a lender early on. But I have noticed that many people will wait sometimes until they absolutely have to take that first step. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of it is, first off, the fun part is going to be looking for houses and, kind of envisioning your life in this new home, especially when you're a first-time home buyer. And a lot of times people, when they go through and start the loan process, it can seem overwhelming. So, that's just the natural thing. Sometimes when there's something that we don't know or it seems overwhelming, we're going to wait to do it until we absolutely have to. But I always encourage people, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today is getting prepared so that you don't have to worry about something coming up preventing you to purchase a home when you're ready and when the time comes.
Yeah, I think that's all true. So hopefully we can help people with that, because the point of today's talk is to lessen that hesitancy people have by covering some of the basics. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to cover 4 different areas that come into play when applying for a VA loan, which are eligibility, income, credit, and assets. So first off, eligibility. There's a thing called a COE, or Certificate of Eligibility. What is a COE and why is it essential for a VA loan?
So the certification of eligibility is the only way that we are going to know that you can actually use your VA loan. That shows that you have the ability to use your VA loan. So there's really no other way that we would know, and it allows you to take advantage of, not having the down payment, not having the private mortgage insurance, all those benefits that come with the VA loan.
Okay. How can veterans obtain their COE?
You can call the VA and you can have them send it to you or mail it to you, but it's usually easier to just work with your lender. We can go ahead and make a request in the VA portal, and we normally get it within 1 business day. So it doesn't take too long.
Okay, awesome. Are there differences in eligibility for active duty versus retired service members?
So you are able to get eligibility once you've done 90 consecutive days of being active duty. As far as veterans, if you have if you serve for 90 days, as long as you were honorably discharged, you're able to get that benefit. If you're a reservist or National Guard, you do have to have your service for longer than 90 days, usually 5 to 6 years. So again, that's why it's important to have a certification of eligibility, because I've had people, think that they're eligible just because they've done National Guard or reserves, that if you haven't initially had active duty time, there is a little bit more of a waiting period.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference between the services as well then. Can a veteran reuse a COE if they've already had a VA loan in the past?
Yeah, so eligibility, I always try to explain it as being this large bank. So you can have a home and you can purchase 1, maybe 2 more homes using your VA loan. The difference is, if you have not sold that home and let's say you're renting it out, that portion of the entitlement is basically going to be spoken for, but you still have entitlement left, most likely. Maybe, I guess, for most of you, about $1 million home your first go around. If you sell the home, then all that eligibility is going to go right back into that bank. So all of these are reasons why it's really good to get the eligibility form early. And we can even do it before you start the application. We can get a few pieces of information from you and get that eligibility form. So when we go into the pre-approval, we know exactly what programs you're looking at.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really good to know. As everyone knows, service members transfer around a lot and they change stations and they move out of areas, and some of them will hang on to a property that they previously bought and they just keep it as a rental. So it's good to know that that can be reused. A surprising number of people don't actually know that they can use it more than once.
Definitely.
So we're going to go ahead and switch gears over to some questions about income. What income sources do VA lenders typically consider? Are there specific differences between active duty and retired service members?
So any income that we're using, and this is regardless of what loan program you're looking at, it's going to be your taxable income. So whatever income you're getting that shows up on your taxes, if you're getting paid something under the table, we're not going to be able to use that. Primarily for active duty, of course, we're looking at the LES, the leave and earnings statement. That shows your base pay and pay allowances and entitlements like your BAH and bonuses, that kind of thing. For retirees, if they have a pension from the military or a first job, we'll look at that. We can get that pension letter. If they are getting disability from the VA, we'll look at that also. And then again, if they have any additional income sources that are regular, stable income, hourly salary, doesn't matter, but, income that they are recording on their taxes and that they've had.
Okay. So maybe you can expound a little bit on how irregular income or multiple sources of income are evaluated. I ask that mostly because, especially for retired service members, but even active duty members, a lot of them will have other jobs, or I know a lot of service members that are real estate agents, say, so they might be any contractors, they might own a business. So maybe you can just dig into that a little bit because I think it's pretty common.
Yeah, and all these things, I think a lot of people will think that the VA may be stricter with their guidelines, but all this income stuff is pretty standard, whether you're going to go VA, FHA, or conventional with your loans. They're going to want to see a history of you having that income because somebody could just say, oh, I'm going to start a second job a month before, starting to look for a home. But how likely is it that that income is going to continue after the fact? So as long as you've had that stable income 12 to 24 months, we're able to look at that average. Somebody like a realtor, we could look at a 1099 for them. Or if someone had another sort of hourly job, then we could average that out. And as long as it's stable, we can use it.
Okay. Yeah. So here's a big one, especially if you do have multiple or irregular incomes sources. Are there any key mistakes veterans make when they're preparing income documents to use their VA loan?
Well, I think a lot of times people don't realize that we're going to need the most recent documents, so they might not know that they need to have their recent W-2s and tax documents because, again, this is taxable income. Or they may forget that we can use things like retirement, or if they're receiving child support or things like that, or any other assistance. Maybe they're getting Social Security for a disabled child or family member that's in their care. On the other hand, a lot of people also forget about deductions. We have to look at childcare costs and child support and those types of things as well. So the more prepared you are and kind of open with everything on the application and getting the documentation, it's really going to make the process a lot smoother as far as the pre-approval goes.
Let's switch over to the next section, which is credit. And this is always an interesting one to me because people, more than anything else, get really hung up on their credit score, right? Either they want it to be higher or they're still working on their credit. It's a very common thing that I hear for me as a realtor. What is the minimum credit score most VA lenders are looking for, and how flexible is that requirement?
So the VA doesn't have a hard stop as far as what your minimum credit score has to be, which is surprising to a lot of people. I mean, I didn't even know that before I started working in the mortgage industry. But most lenders do want to see it at 580 or above, and there is a little bit of flexibility there. But of course, we're going to look at all the factors. So if this floor is super low and there's also not a great payment history, or maybe the income isn't as stable, that's not really going to help your chances of getting pre-approved. If the score is lower, but then all the other factors we're looking at are strong, then we're usually able to get that approval.
Right. Okay. So, over the course of our lifetimes, all of us get into situations or, we make mistakes or overextend ourselves sometimes and we miss a payment or we, rack up some debt, it happens. Right. But can a veteran with a history of missed payments or other credit issues still qualify to use their VA loan?
Yeah, the VA loan is a little bit more forgiving than other loan programs. but they're really going to be looking mostly at the most recent credit history. So if you're looking to purchase a home, you're thinking like the last 12 to 24 months, you want to try to make sure you hit all of those minimum payments on all of those things that are reporting on your credit report. Because they understand, sometimes people fall into hardships, medical issues come up, all sorts of other things.
Okay. So on a related note, how do lenders factor in monthly debts when calculating debt to income ratio for VA loans?
So when we evaluate your credit, it's going to show us everything that's reporting on there as a monthly debt. So we'll see your minimum, maybe a car payment, credit card payment, all that sorts of stuff. And then we'll go ahead and look at your gross income, looking at all those sources that we talked about earlier. Really, 41% is kind of a general benchmark. However, we've had approvals. I personally did approvals for VA client that their debt to income was 50, 55, 57,
Mhm.
60%, and they still got an approved status. So you want to be able to think about all the factors. So if you have a really strong credit history, you probably can get away with a little bit higher debt to income because there isn't just like credit a set minimum. We're looking at all the factors.
Okay. Wow. It sounds like there's a lot of flexibility then in the program.
Yeah.
Okay. So what advice would you give a veteran who needs to improve their credit score before applying?
And you definitely want to make sure that you are paying down your credit cards, keep your balances low. Your utilization is a huge part of your credit score. Make all minimum payments on time. If that's all you can do, then that's good. And avoid opening new lines of credit. So that means credit for you or co-signing anything. And be aware of what's reported on your credit report because a lot of times there are inaccuracies or old disputes or things that aren't on there anymore. So you want to make sure you get that taken care of and removed from your report before you're looking to purchase a home.
Okay. So I think that's enough on credit here. So we're going to go ahead and move over to assets, aka money in the bank. What types of assets do lenders typically look for during the VA loan process?
So, of course, the easiest one is looking at your checking and savings account, that money that you have readily available. But a lot of people will use a retirement fund or if they're active duty and they have TSP or thrift savings plan, then they can use that. So a down payment is not required for the VA loan, but there are some, closing costs and other out-of-pocket costs usually associated with purchasing a home.
Right.
So, we'll always ask for that even if there isn't a down payment.
Okay. We touched on this topic in a previous video we did a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and touch base with it here again. Are there any minimum liquid asset requirements for VA loans, even though they don't require a down payment?
So there isn't a minimum that you have to say that you have to have. Most lenders prefer you to have 2 to 3 months of the mortgage. We call that reserves, just to kind of show that you have that stability in case of emergency. But we have had clients that if maybe the seller or they has been able to cover their closing costs, but they don't have to have a whole ton of savings to get approved. So again, like flexibility is the major word that we think of when we think of the VA loan.
Okay. You mentioned closing costs, and that is something that people do need to factor in. And a lot of them might not really think about it initially because they think about the no down payment with the VA loans. And a lot of people kind of clump them together, down payment
Yeah.
and closing costs, but they are separate things. And there's a few different ways that you can compensate for the closing costs. And one of them is a really interesting one that people probably don't think about enough. Is it common for veterans to use gift money for closing costs? Are there rules around that?
Yeah, it's very common. I have a buyer right now that they are getting a little bit from the seller, a little bit from gift money, and then they're covering about 1% of the closing costs themselves, or 1% of the, 3% of the closing costs themselves. So
Okay.
whenever you get gift money, you want to be able to talk to those family members. It's usually going to be something maybe from if you have a spouse who isn't on the loan, they can gift you the money. If you have a family member who isn't on the loan, they can gift you the money. Just keep in mind that we will have to get a signed gift letter and we will have to see where those funds came from. So looking at their bank statement and then also seeing when those funds are deposited into your statements, just to kind of keep the chain. So this ensures that it's not going to affect your debt to income ratio, and it's not going to be flagged as an unusual or suspicious deposit into your account.
Yeah. So gift money just can't pop up out of nowhere, right?
Right. And people can't just give you cash. And I've run into that before where people say, oh, like I've been saving cash, or my wife has been saving cash, or mom has cash. Well, there isn't really a good way for us to source where that money came from. And part of our job, is to make sure that we understand where all the funds are going in and everything looks as legit as possible when you're looking to purchase a home.
Right. Absolutely. So last question here. Are there any red flags veterans should avoid when managing assets before they apply?
So I know a lot of people, myself included, right, will transfer money from our checkings account to our savings account, or maybe we have friends that we transfer money from. I had a buyer that was receiving rent via Zelle. And so we had to verify, well, where was that rent coming from that you're getting a month? Where's the rental agreement? Kind of matching everything up. So if you don't have to make large transfers, try to avoid that. If you are making large transfers, then just know we may be asking for those other account statements or an explanation as to where that money is coming from. So it's really best to keep things as simple and as transparent as you can. If you've recently had a large deposit, we always review that when we're doing the pre-approval. That may be something that we asked about before we issue that pre-approval letter too.
Right. Yeah. I think basic rule of thumb there with money is that there has to be a paper trail, right? You can't just, you're out of nowhere.
Right.
No. Okay. Well, I think that covers all the basics that we wanted to talk about today in this video. And I hope that helps anyone out there who is a veteran that may be wondering how to use their VA loan or what they need to know beforehand. Was there anything you wanted to add before we sign off today?
I just want to encourage people to ask questions. I mean, you don't have to start the process and do the credit pull and do all that stuff yet, but you can still get prepared. And there are tools that we can give you as lenders to kind of set you up for success. So don't get overwhelmed by the idea. Ask questions. And that way, whether it's now or later, you'll feel better once it's time to actually move forward.
Right. Absolutely. Like I said in the beginning of the video, the whole purpose of this video is just to help reduce that natural anxiety that a lot of people have, when they come to talk about money and finances. And I know a lot of it has to do with paperwork. Paperwork is a pain in the butt, as everybody knows. Well, thanks to everyone who watched the video. And if you do have any more questions about buying a home in the Hampton Roads area with a VA loan or without one, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Deanna. Our contact details are in the description below. Or you can like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube or social medias to get more useful info and tips about buying and selling real estate. Until next time, be well, and I'll see you out there.
Bye.